Micturition and its abnormalities. We will be looking into the physiological anatomy of the urinary bladder and its neuron control, the normal mechanism of micturition reflex, abnormalities of micturition, and the pressure volume changes using a cystometrogram. So starting from the physiological anatomy of the bladder, as you can see over here, is this the body of the bladder in which the urine collects. This is the neck portion of the bladder, which is then joining with the urethra. The neck is basically the extension of the body and it passes through the urogenital triangle and is at the end connected to the urethra. The posterior urethra is known as the lower part of the bladder neck. The trigone of the bladder is a histological area. You can appreciate over here this triangular area which is present immediately above the bladder neck. Its apex is the portion where the bladder neck is opening into the posterior urethra, and at the uppermost angles you can appreciate the ureteric openings into the bladder. So at the upper end, two ureters opening, at the apex, the bladder neck where it is going to join with the urethra. If we look at the mucosa of this bladder trigone, this is smooth, whereas the rest of the bladder mucosa you can appreciate is thrown into folds. The purpose of this fold is to provide the increased surface area. The bladder smooth muscles are forming three layers histologically: the circular, longitudinal, and the spiral layer, and we call it the detrosor muscle. There are multiple gap junctions between the unitary smooth muscles of the bladder wall, which have low resistance electrical pathway and help in rapid conduction of the action potential and a unified muscular contraction for the purpose of micturition. The detrosor muscle contraction can increase the pressure inside the bladder up to 40 to 60 millimeters of mercury, which helps in emptying of the bladder. So quickly review, this is the body of the bladder, the neck of the bladder draining into the urethra. This is the bladder trigone, which has ureteric openings on the upper end, and the apex is at the level of the bladder neck. The bladder muscle is detrosor muscle, which is thrown into three layers: circular, longitudinal, and the spiral layers. The bladder neck is passing through the urogenital diaphragm. The ureteric openings at the upper level of the bladder trigone are shown over here. The special feature of the ureteric opening in the urinary bladder is that ureters are running obliquely through the detrosor muscle, as you can see, entering over here and then running obliquely to open over here. And the significance of this obliqueness is whenever there is increased bladder pressure or detrosor muscles are contracting, these get obliterated and the backflow of urine into the ureter is that's why avoided. If they had entered directly straight into the bladder and the pressure would have been high in the body of the bladder, the urine might have flown back into the ureters. Because of this oblique arrangement, this backflow is prevented. Another important feature over here is the bladder traverse approximately 1 to 2 centimeters beneath the bladder mucosa before opening into the bladder, and that also provides a safety factor. Whenever there is contraction of the detrosor muscles, that area also gets contracted and the backflow of urine is prevented. So because of their obliqueness and passage behind the mucosa for 1 to 2 centimeters, this is providing a safety factor against the backflow of the urine into the ureters. Vesico-ureteral reflex is an abnormal phenomena and in which the urine will be backflowing from the bladder to the ureter. Vesico for the vesical wall of the bladder and ureteral for ureter. Detrosor muscle is functioning normally to compress the oblique portion of the ureter so that the urine may not backflow into the ureter. In case of vesico-ureteral reflex, mostly this is because of an anatomical defect in which either there is shorter ureteral course through the bladder wall, because of which these are incompletely occluded during the micturition and urine is propelled backwards. This can ultimately result in ureteral enlargement, and if severe, this can increase pressure by backflowing even into the renal calyces and medulla, leading to the potential damage if continued for prolonged period of time. So vesicoureteral reflex, because of the stasis, backflow in the ureter not only can lead to acute infections but also can result in ultimate renal anomalies because of the development of the back pressure and increased in the renal tubular increased hydrostatic pressure. While we are talking about the physiological anatomy of the bladder, let's also look into the details of the bladder sphincters. There is an internal urethral sphincter and an external urethral sphincter. The internal sphincter is basically the detrusor muscle, which is interlaced with the elastic tissue over here. It is thickened over here to function as the sphincter, and it is tonically constricted and is under the involuntary control. It keeps the bladder neck and posterior urethra empty of urine. Mostly this is contracted over here all the time so that urine may not enter into the neck of the bladder or the posterior urethra. And it prevents bladder emptying until the pressure in the bladder rises above the critical threshold. Whereas the external sphincter is present over here, you can appreciate this portion, and this is present along the urethra while it is passing through the urogenital diaphragm, and it is composed of the voluntary skeletal muscle, whereas internal sphincter was composed of the smooth muscle fibers of detrusor muscles and it was under involuntary control. Under voluntary control of the nervous system, so the people can prevent urination consciously or can voluntarily even initiate the micturition, as we will discuss while discussing the micturition reflex. This is showing the innervation of the bladder. As you can see, from the thoracolumbar region are coming the sympathetic fibers which are supplying the body of the bladder as well as the trigone portion, whereas the parasympathetic fibers from the sacral segment of spinal cord are supplying not only the body but also the bladder neck and posterior urethra portion. The pudendal fibers again from the sacral region of the spinal cord are the somatic fibers which are supplying the voluntary external sphincter. So both parasympathetic and pudendal fibers which are going to play their important role in the micturition reflex are coming from the sacral segment of the spinal cord. Bladder innervation, principal nerve supply by the pelvic nerves. We also call it sacral plexus. Components include the sensory nerves as well as the motor nerve fibers. Sensory nerves are going to detect the degree of stretch of the bladder walls, and especially the innervation is dense in the posterior urethra portion. Whereas the motor nerve fibers include the parasympathetic preganglionic fibers and the short postganglionic fibers which are supplying the detrusor muscle as well as the internal urethral sphincter, and they are going to facilitate the bladder contraction and micturition. Pudendal nerve fibers are somatic motor nerve fibers which are supplying the external bladder sphincter or external urethral sphincter. Sympathetic innervation is coming through the hypogastric nerves from the lumbar segment of the spinal cord, and this is going to majorly stimulate the blood vessels, although it also contributes to the sensation of fullness and pain, but not directly going to modulate the micturition reflex. Ureterorenal reflex. This is stimulated from the ureteric portion and going and taking back the message to the kidneys. Now the stimulus over here is pain. For example, because of the ureteral blockade, this will be sent to the spinal cord and the resultant would be sympathetic discharge to the kidney. This sympathetic discharge will constrict the renal arterioles, decrease the filtration and urine output from the kidney, and this is how it is going to relieve the pain caused because of the urethral blockage. In the previous session, we had seen the reno-renal reflex. In reno-renal reflex, there was the role of increased pressure in kidney, taking the sensory message and bringing back by decreased sympathetic supply to the other kidney. Whereas in ureterorenal reflex, the message is going from the ureter to the kidneys in the response of increased sympathetic discharge to the kidney and decreased urine output. This is cystometrogram, which is showing the relation of pressure and volume of the bladder. On x-axis, you can see the change in volume in the bladder, and on y-axis, there is intravesical pressure in centimeters of water. If we look into the details of it, as the bladder volume keeps on increasing, you can appreciate some changes in the pressure. Starting from when there was no urine in the bladder, the pressure was approximately 0 centimeters of water. For initial few ml up to 20 to 30 ml or 50 ml of urine filling in the bladder, the pressure increased up to 5 to 10 centimeters of water, as you can appreciate in this portion of the cystometrogram. So initially no urine, no pressure, 0 volume, 0 pressure. For initial 30 to 50 ml of filling, the pressure increased from 5 to 10 centimeters of water. Afterwards, you can see from 50 ml to approximately 300 ml, the volume was increased a lot in the bladder, but pressure change was almost insignificant. So with a very small rise in pressure, a huge volume of urine was accumulated in the bladder. This is the second phase of the cystometrogram. After which, even a small increase in the urine volume, there is going to be a huge increase in the pressure, which is the third phase of the cystometrogram. Another thing you can appreciate in this cystometrogram are the dotted lines. The solid line is showing the tonic changes in the pressure of the bladder, whereas the dotted lines are showing the micturition contractions or the phasic change in the bladder pressure. These are superimposed on the tonic changes and are periodically acute increase in the pressure. They last only from a few seconds to a minute, and the intensity can vary from a few centimeters of water to approximately even 100 centimeters of water, and these are caused by the micturition reflex. Cystometrogram, if we define it, is a plot of intravesical pressure against the volume of the fluid in the bladder, and this image from the Ganong is showing the 3 phases labeled as 1A, 1B and phase 2, where phase 1A is the phase when initial urine accumulation led to a small rise in pressure from 5 to 10 centimeters of water. Phase 1B is showing when the urine accumulated from approximately 50 to 350 or 400 ml with a very small rise in pressure, and afterwards even a small increase in the volume inside the bladder is going to lead to a steep increase in the pressure, which is going to stimulate the micturition reflex and lead to the urination. So these 3 are the phases of bladder filling, which may result in micturition ultimately. So here comes a question: why was there a small rise in pressure with a large accumulation of urine volume during the phase 1B? This is explained by the law of Laplace. The bladder wall has the property that even if it is stretched, the tension will not be maintained. And how does the law of Laplace explains this? If you recall from your knowledge of maybe the cardiovascular or respiratory physiology, law of Laplace say that pressure is equal to wall tension divided by radius. Now, when the bladder was being filled, the radius of bladder was also increasing, that is, it was enlarging, as well as tension in the wall was increasing initially, as we saw in the phase 1A. throughout the phase 1b, what happened? Not only the tension but also radius was increased, keeping the pressure almost constant. So this is how the law of Laplace explains the phase 1b of the cystometrogram, after which the further rise in the bladder volume is going to increase even the pressure, which is going to stimulate the micturition. Now we are talking about the micturition, so let's see how does it occur. This is a process by which the urinary bladder empties when it is filled, and it is carried about in 3 steps. The step 1 is bladder filling, which is a mechanical event. Phase 2 is the micturition reflex, which is a nervous mechanism. And phase 3 is emptying of the bladder or urination, which is governed by the voluntary processes as well. So this is showing the micturition reflex. Previously, we have seen the bladder filling by using the cystometrogram, phase 1a, phase 1b and phase 2. This is showing the bladder filling phases. Next, we are looking into the micturition reflex, which is the second step of micturition. So what initiates the micturition reflex is the stimulus, and the stimulus over here is the activation of stretch receptors in the bladder wall and especially the posterior urethra. Whenever there is bladder filling, stretch of these receptors, especially in the posterior urethra, this becomes the stimulus and stretch, and the receptors are present in the posterior urethra. This message is carried by the afferent sensory nerves via the pelvic nerves to the sacral segment of the spinal cord, which is the center of integration for this micturition reflex. From here, the efferent nerves in the parasympathetic fibers and the pudendal fibers carry back the message to the effector organ. So the parasympathetic fibers, they lead to contraction of the bladder wall or detrusor muscles and relaxation of the internal sphincter. This is the parasympathetic impact, which is going to facilitate the third part of micturition, that is expulsion of the urine out from the urethra. Whereas the pudendal nerve is the somatic nerve, which is going to relax the external sphincter, and this is also under the voluntary control. If the conditions are favorable, this relaxation will occur and the third step, that is emptying, will be completed. If the conditions are not favorable, one might voluntarily inhibit the relaxation of external urethral sphincter, rather keep it constricted, avoiding the urination or emptying up to a limit. So bladder filling to the micturition reflex, which is majorly a parasympathetic reflex, from the stretch receptors of the bladder via the pelvic nerves to the sacral segment of the spinal cord. From there, again via the parasympathetic fibers to the detrusor and internal sphincter muscle, and via the pudendal nerve to the external urethral sphincter. So while the voluntary control has a role to play to lead to or inhibit the micturition, on the other hand, voluntary action can be used to even initiate the micturition reflex as well. Normally, we said the micturition reflex is initiated by the stretch of the receptors in the posterior urethra because of the accumulation of the urine. On the other hand, voluntary initiation of the micturition reflex involved the relaxation of the pelvic floor muscles or contraction of the abdominal muscles. These two actions combined together can lead to increased pressure in the bladder, which will stimulate the stretch receptors in the bladder neck and the posterior urethra, and then this stretch will lead to the normal micturition reflex via the sacral segment of the spinal cord. And if the external urethral sphincter is relaxed, the bladder emptying may occur. and after the bladder emptying, usually 5 to 10 mLs are still left behind. Not only the micturition reflex is a spinal cord reflex at the sacral segment of the spinal cord, it has some voluntary control plus some facilitation and inhibition from the higher brain centers. If this is cut off, the micturition will still be occurring, but of course that would be unannounced. However, the role of facilitatory and inhibitory center is to keep the strength of this micturition reflex in balance. The facilitatory area which enhance the response to the micturition are present in the pons as well as in the posterior hypothalamus, whereas the inhibitory areas in the midbrain are going to decrease the intensity of the micturition reflex. How do they do this? By changing the threshold for response. For example, if facilitatory areas are more active, they will decrease the threshold and micturition reflex will be initiated at a low volume of urine in the bladder. Whereas in case of hyperactivation of inhibitory areas, the threshold will be increased and there would be accumulation of much larger urine volume in the bladder before the micturition reflex is initiated. What we have discussed by now is the normal micturition reflex, in which the facilitatory and inhibitory areas are kept in a balance. This flowchart of micturition reflex is also including the role of the facilitatory area from the higher brain centers. For example, the micturition reflex initiated by the stretch in the bladder wall, and if the conditions are appropriate, the pons facilitatory area by the facilitatory impulses will be strengthening the micturition reflex, and the rest of the micturition reflex is of course the same by the efferent nerves of the parasympathetic nerves and the pudendal nerve. So the higher brain centers have an influence on this micturition reflex by keeping the micturition inhibited until required, and also they have a role to make a person capable of initiating the micturition reflex even voluntarily if required. Now that we have seen the normal micturition reflex, let's look into some abnormalities of micturition. The three major abnormalities are named in front of you: atonic bladder, automatic bladder, and neurogenic bladder, and we will be looking into their pathophysiology, causes, and effects one by one. So starting from the atonic bladder, as is evident by the name, the bladder has lost its tone, and the reason is destruction of the sensory nerve fibers. Now, if there is destruction of the sensory nerve fibers from the bladder, the afferent limb of the micturition reflex is lost, so the message will not be taken over to the spinal cord, and of course there would be no efferent nerve coming back if there is no message being carried to the sacral segment of spinal cord, and micturition reflex will not be carried upon. Rather, the bladder keeps on filling until there would come a limit after which it will not be capable of holding any more urine and there will be overflow incontinence. So the problem started from the damage to the sensory nerve fibers. Bladder got overdistended, leading to the overflow incontinence. For example, seen in patients of the syphilis, and we call this tabes dorsalis, in which the sacral segment of spinal cord is afferent supply is impaired, and such bladder is also known as tabetic bladder. Then comes the automatic bladder. The problem in case of automatic bladder is the spinal cord damage above the sacral region. Now the sacral segment is intact, the afferent and efferent nerves are intact, so micturition reflex may be there, but the micturition reflex would be there, but the external influence from the higher brain centers would be lost. The voluntary action would be lost, the pons midbrain action would be lost, so it will become an automatic event. Whenever the bladder is full, the message will go to the spinal cord, come back to the bladder. The periodic unannounced bladder emptying would be occurring. For example, seen in case of stroke, there is damage to the maybe lumbar segment of the spinal cord. The micturition reflex initially would be lost because of the spinal shock, but ultimately it would come back. But once it's back, it would be in the form of periodic unannounced bladder emptying. Whenever there is filling, the reflex will occur itself and the person would not be knowing it. That is why it is called as automatic bladder. Third abnormality we see over here is the neurogenic bladder, and the problem over here is because of imbalance between the facilitatory and inhibitory signals from the higher brain centers. The facilitatory areas, they are working, but there is lack of inhibitory signals from the brain. When the facilitative impulses take over, they will decrease the threshold. At a much lower urine volume, the micturition reflex will be initiated. So what will happen? The patient will present with frequent uncontrollable urination. The bladder and sacral segment of spinal cord is too much facilitated from the facilitatory impulses that patient cannot hold back the urination even if he wants to. For example, occurring in case of diabetes mellitus, multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease. So to quickly review it again, atonic bladder because of damage to the sensory or afferent nerve fibers, and the major problem is overflow incontinence. Overflow incontinence and damage to the sensory nerve fibers. Automatic bladder, the problem is in the spinal cord. Above the sacral region, the micturition reflex will become unannounced. Neurogenic bladder, the problem is loss of inhibitory signals. The micturition reflex will become so frequent and uncontrollable. I'm going to show you 3 scenarios one by one. You can look into the history findings and try to guess which of the 3 abnormalities of bladder is this person suffering from. So this patient is suffering from frequent dribbling of the urine, particularly when he is engaged in physical activity. He reports that he feels urge to urinate but often cannot make it to the bathroom. So he is suffering from atonic bladder. As you can see, the clue of frequent dribbling, the overflow incontinence. The bladder is full, the feeling of fullness is being carried away by the sympathetic nerves, but the afferent parasympathetic nerve fibers are not there. So the micturition reflex is not occurring. The bladder is overdistended, leading to overflow incontinence. Next patient. Okay, he had some spinal cord injury, loss of control over bladder emptying, is suffering from automatic bladder. Involuntary emptying is occurring repeatedly. Lastly, this patient is suffering from frequent urination, uncontrollable urination, and is suffering from this social concern. So she might be suffering from the neurogenic bladder. So that's all about the abnormalities of micturition. Thank you.